Thank you so much for joining us. Very first question is the easiest one. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you doing now, and how did you get there?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you about this. I'm Beth Ann Kaminkow. I am the CEO of Dentsu North America and also Global Clients. How did I get here? A lot of hard work, I guess, some tenacity and resilience, and then always be learning as a philosophy, but truly just, taking kind of one step at a time, moving into roles that inspired me or that I felt would be pioneering of some new change that I felt like the companies I was working with needed. I've spent a good part of my career in different versions of professional services. So almost every area of integrated marketing, largely in the kind of agency, big holding company space, was part of a founding team that sold a company to Omnicom. And so that got me on the track. And then I also felt like a lot of people do that it would be good to walk in the shoes of our clients. So did a CMO stint as a global CMO and important time to again really understand what's different on the client side, how to gain even deeper empathy and understanding of what it means to be truly client centric. Ultimately drawn back into the agency world, first through a consulting practice and then now onto Dentsu.
That's amazing. I mean, you've reached the C-suite status, the CEO title. Is there any other secret about how, like how you were handpicked for that role?
Well, I'll speak more broadly about the CEO role in particular.
Yeah.
And, because I've had it for quite some time now in different iterations. It came from a really close friend when I was having dinner at one point. I'd been number two in org design for a while in different roles and, knew that I was putting in a lot of the thinking and strategy or work in those positions, but I didn't necessarily have in my mind, to be honest, the ambition or aspiration to say, well, I should be the CEO. I just wasn't thinking that way yet. And it took this very close friend who knew me really well and also saw me professionally to say, I think it's time for you to change your vowel. And I honestly, in the conversation, didn't even know what he meant when he first said it. And then I was like,
Hmm.
what does that mean? And it came down to the E, whether you're a COO or, a CTO or, some chief operating officer. And, I'd had versions of those titles to almost, again, signal that I was doing a lot of the job of a CEO, but not yet owning that title. And so he was the one that really kind of put the thinking in my mind. I thought, okay, maybe I do need to just put that ambition out there and just articulate like what would it take in the minds of the people I was working with and reporting to move into that next position, and what does it really mean differently to ultimately be the CEO, which a lot of times does come down to things like the solo burden that you carry, because as many people in the C-suite know, you do a lot of inputting and contributing from a responsibility, accountability, and strategic thinking standpoint. But there is a slight maybe is an understatement, but there is some real distinct changes that happen when you're the CEO.
Something that I found particularly hard is in my role of like co-founder, and then as we've scaled and grown and got, you continue to elevate yourself, and you hire people that were doing your job. How do you like scale from being a doer to a leader? Do you have any advice about how you've thought about that and tried to like disentangle yourself from the day to day so that your team can do that work? For me, that's been pretty challenging.
Yeah, and I think probably because similar to myself, when you get in, your own energy from the work, you enjoy the work,
Yeah.
and you get to know the team and you get to evaluate things by being in the work. And in my field in particular, like I don't ever really let go of that part of the trade and the work. I also think it's so important to stay relevant in thinking through what our clients need and being part of that delivery system as well. And then also recognizing that you're still always bringing different insight based on your own set of experiences to the team. But to answer your question, I think the things that I've done over the years has been one, always ask myself the question of what am I uniquely either capable of doing or am the only person in the organization that I can do, not be necessarily because of skill, but because of title. And we all have to, just reflect on that and recognize that oftentimes title does open doors or has a responsibility to drive a certain kind of a conversation with the client, with the industry, whatever it might be, that you have to fully move into the role and to own all aspects of what your responsibility to that role for the organization is. So that's one thing I think about a lot. The other thing I think about is it's very comfortable for all of us to work for our teams, with our teams, and sometimes feel like whether it's a board, in your cases too, when you're part of a private company or you're a founder, but there's always bosses. There's always
Mhm.
going to be
Yes.
bosses. So whoever they are, I think we always have to remind ourselves that managing up, it may seem sometimes to other people as self-promotion or time that should be going back into the organization. In reality, managing up is just as important for everybody else in your organization. It is just as important to take care of them because, again, you're the linkage between their roles and those people. And so, mastering what that means, understanding what it means to cultivate and nurture and manage those relationships to the best of your ability is also uniquely your role. So it's striking and finding that balance too that has helped me over the years.
Wow, that's very powerful and so true. It's such a good way to think about it too, that I really hadn't thought about before. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so how about your seat at the table? When did you realize that you had influence and how did you earn it?
Well, I think like many of us probably listening to this, we want to get it to the table. And I think that's so important. And, fortunately, I was at the table pretty early on. And then you look around the room and you think to yourself, oh, I'm the youngest at this table, or I'm this at this table. And I think you have to keep telling yourself that that circumstance is not going to always be the circumstance. Like at some point, you're no longer the youngest. So I always said to myself, how do I need to show up that isn't self-limiting either, that isn't putting myself in my own mind, the differences in the equation because I know them and allowing, what gravitas could be expected or what contribution could be expected from me to come to the table. So I almost think about it like Hamilton of I want to be in the room where it happens. I want to have the seat at the table and I'm not going to give away my shot. And so I always think about those three things when I'm there and make sure that I'm hitting on each. And from not giving away my shot, what I usually think through is I don't have to be outspoken. I don't have to be the one taking up any air and being the majority of the conversation, but I have to think about where I'm going to voice the thing that is going to be, again, different, add value, bring a different kind of contribution and drive a different kind of a conversation at the table. Like what is it that I want to make sure that is being said and that I'm contributing to the conversation so that when I leave, I know my value was there and felt. I know that I contributed meaningful, impactful thoughts. And so even if it's not a majority and not a large part of the conversation, I have made my voice heard and my impact felt and the influence is there.
Yeah, quality over quantity.
Yep.
Okay, tell us, was there a turning point? Was there a challenge early in your career that later became a strength for you?
I'm going to be, and I think you have a bit of a female audience in this one. So I'm going to be really honest with my own story. I am sort of hardwired with a sunny disposition of, optimism and enjoying being in professional settings. And so, you exude that a bit. You give off the energy of that desire and ambition and eagerness to some degree. And I've heard
Mhm.
those words all used in context negatively at times for feedback over my career. And so I
Hmm.
think I was very self-conscious early on of do I need to, modulate and manage myself almost more inward or put off less frequency and light in a room. And so I think so that was really kind of the a really important inflection point for me when I basically, and I won't go through the whole story of like where I heard and what I
Hmm.
heard, but I had a moment where I was in a place where insight was delivered. And I took from that we should be coming from a place of abundance. And the more that we let our light shine and the more that we show up in the best version of ourselves, the more that we actually give other people permission and room to do that too. Oftentimes in our industry, we felt like there it's a limited supply, and somehow by you being all of who you want to be, someone else isn't able to be. It's really not that. And so I just made a commitment to myself that if that was going to be what gets in my way, that I would learn how to navigate that. But in actuality, I wanted to do justice to who I want to be and the ability to allow that to unlock potential and to give grace to others to feel confident in doing more of that for themselves as well.
Hmm. And reflecting on something like that when you're older, when you think about that, when I hear you talking about that, I would think as a younger, I would think like they're wrong. Like maybe when you're younger, you don't think that someone that's telling you feedback is wrong. But when you reflect on it later, you feel like maybe that was bad advice or not accurate information.
I think everything has its context. So as I've gotten older, actually the wisdom is that it was in context. And I'm sure whoever was giving it to me was looking out for my best interest. And those are the dynamics that exist. They still exist today for different reasons. And it's always good to be self-aware. But I
Mhm.
don't think that means you should temper your desire to, have do be all that you can be in a circumstance and in an organization.
Yeah. All right. Well, what about inspiration? What inspires you? Do you read books? Do you listen to podcasts? Is there a particular LinkedIn voice? Where do you kind of find inspiration or knowledge and education?
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I find to be most inspiring is to listen to people who are in really big roles, either before you or even historical figures or other CEOs who have written biographies. That's what I geek out on the most. But also the fact that we're in an industry that is constantly changing. And
Yep.
so I've kind of built the muscle to not fear that change and to like see it as a gift and learn from it and use it as a tool to help me kind of grow further. And so right now, Shelley Palmer is the person that I am following religiously. If you don't know him, check him out. Incredible newsletters and blogs. And he's just been a disciple of great knowledge for our industry right now going through AI. And he says it in like, that's the other thing I get attracted to, people who are putting it in pragmatic, real terms that you can really understand of, okay, this is exactly what I need to hear every morning, before I start my day to bring me back to the change is happening just so fast. What do I need to know? What's going to matter most for my business? And how do I sort of manage through the change with everybody? So that's my latest recommendation, but it's usually gravitating to those sources of knowledge or it just hearing from somebody else's experience and journey.
Yeah. I think in especially right now, it feels like we're in this huge pivot, like we were a couple of years ago when retail media was on, 2020 when we or 2018 when we started Pacvue. That was a pivot time. And then I feel like now is this huge pivot time in AI and reading and consuming content information, being curious to understand what it all means and understand where the puck is going is probably a big part of your job too.
Yep. So anyone out there that can help me, I welcome it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, last but not least, not like you have a lot of time on your hands because of all the things that you're doing, but is there anything that you're doing outside of work that you're passionate about, a board, a cause, or something that maybe relates to work that you do?
I mean, actually, the one that I'm going to highlight, I doesn't fully relate to work, but it does relate to something that we all are kind of faced with every day that we see as a massive challenge in our world today, which is homelessness. So I'm on a board. I have been for a long time, the National Board of Back on My Feet, which is an organization that uses running to help address people who are experiencing homelessness. And it's a really incredible population that we help because you realize that a lot of people who are in the situation are really just genuinely economically either down on their luck or they were never really given the circumstance that would allow them to live a different kind of productive life. And then that can come down to everything from not having community, not having the self-confidence, not having certain capability inside yourself cultivated enough to make you effective. And running in the morning is part of how we work on getting them into these programs of learning a discipline, feeling joined up as part of a community, feeling a sense of self-sufficiency and self-confidence and control and routine and ritual that's healthy. and it leads to job training and ultimately leads to, once job placement comes, being in homes and residences that they can feel like they're really achieving. And I love it because it's always been about a hand up, not a handout, and
Mm.
a part of the community who is really open to trying to drive change in their lives. And it also is very humbling, especially when you run with this, because you realize all of us oftentimes every morning that you wake up have choices to make. And in some ways, we're all back on our feet every day. And it's just something I've always loved from both a personal standpoint. It sets me up for life in my day, but also the give back aspect of it.
I love that. And for a lot of people who want to do something like this outside of work, but are
Yeah.
worried about the commitment of what it would take, what is the commitment? How many hours a month would you say? Like what does that look like?
Well, it ebbs and flows because we've gone through a lot of like CEO changes. So we've learned some interesting board things that hopefully over time for me will set me up for different types of board opportunities. Even leading through the pandemic, which was an interesting challenge for our organization. But you can choose as much as you want in terms of the actual running and involvement, but I do that anyway. The meetings are usually 4 times a year in terms of significant solid meetings and then some calls in between. But it's the adage of you give people who are busy, more to do because you know that they're going to, get it done. So, no, I think when things are important to you, you make the time to get it done.
Yeah. Well, this has been amazing. I've learned so much in, I don't know, like 10 minutes. So, and I'm going to definitely check out.
I feel like I should be asking you questions and learning from you because I know you. I know you have a lot of
Uh,
insight.
different things.
Yeah,
Definitely an acquisition has taught me a lot. So my education, the time frame of building Pacvue to where we are today, I think I've consolidated so many years in a short amount of time just because of how fast our industry has been changing.
totally.
It's just you wake up every day and there's something new, there's some new news, something new to learn. And then also getting to talk to people like you too is just an amazing ability to understand what other people are kind of looking at and dealing with. And so you've had an amazing career and I really appreciate learning from you. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Melissa.